in the morning.
Welcome back to our channel, your premier destination for the deepest dives into the drama of Genoa City. Today is a brilliant day to unpack the explosive psychological warfare brewing behind the gilded gates of the Newman Ranch. The sprawling estate of the Newman family has always been a fortress, a symbol of absolute power, impenetrable wealth, and unyielding authority. Yet, behind its meticulously manicured lawns and heavy mahogany doors, the ranch frequently serves as a battleground for the most intimate and toxic psychological warfare Genoa City has ever witnessed. Currently, the tension within these walls has reached a suffocating crescendo. The internal dynamics of the Newman family are fracturing under the weight of Victor Newman's audacious and deeply controversial decisions. At the epicenter of this brewing storm is the unbelievable presence of Matt Clark, a man whose very name evokes visceral terror and profound trauma for the Newman family, particularly for Sharon and Nick Newman. Victor's unilateral decree to integrate Matt into the daily fabric of the ranch has set the stage for a psychological thriller that is as heartbreaking as it is terrifying. Nick Newman's initial reaction to his father's mandate was one of raw, unfiltered revulsion. When Victor casually announced that Matt Clark would be taking up residence in the tack house, a mere stone's throw from where the family sleeps, Nick's protective instincts flared into a desperate, vocal opposition. The history between Matt, Nick, and Sharon is not merely complicated, it is soaked in historical abuse, psychological torture, and near-fatal encounters. The idea of allowing a known monster to sleep on the property is, to any rational observer, a catastrophic lapse in judgment. Nick stood his ground, his voice echoing through the opulent office, demanding that his father see reason. He argued passionately that bringing Matt onto the ranch was a direct threat to their safety and an insult to the trauma they had all endured. Nick's opposition was not just about physical safety, it was a desperate plea to preserve the fragile mental peace he has been fighting so hard to maintain amidst his grueling battle with addiction. However, Victor Newman does not operate on the spectrum of human empathy, he operates on the cold, calculated grid of a grandmaster playing three-dimensional chess. Victor's response to Nick's impassioned pleas was chillingly pragmatic. He dismissed his son's profound anxieties with a wave of his hand, insisting that keeping Matt close was a strategic necessity. Victor's philosophy has always been to keep his friends close and his enemies under a microscopic level of surveillance. By housing Matt in the tack house, Victor believes he is neutralizing a volatile threat, transforming a dangerous wild card into a controlled asset. Victor does not see a traumatizer when he looks at Matt. He sees a highly effective, albeit broken, tool waiting to be repurposed for the greater glory of the Newman Empire. What is truly devastating about this confrontation is not just Victor's callousness, but Nick's eventual capitulation. After fighting so vehemently, Nick ultimately caved to his father's demands, stepping back and allowing Matt to claim the tack house. To understand this surrender, one must look at the agonizing reality of Nick's current existence. He is a man drowning in the undertow of a severe fentanyl and cocaine addiction, his mind and body exhausted by the relentless cycle of craving and withdrawal. He barely survived the horrific events in Las Vegas, and his emotional reserves are entirely depleted. In my opinion, this is how Nick is protecting himself from pain. By surrendering his agency to his father, he temporarily absolves himself of the crushing responsibility of dealing with Matt Clark. It is infinitely easier for a weary, broken Nick to let Victor be the monster who controls the monster than to fight a grueling war on two fronts while his own mind is so terrifyingly fragile. With Nick's opposition effectively silenced, Victor seamlessly transitioned to the next phase of his Machiavellian design. He summoned Matt Clark to outline the parameters of his so-called redemption. Victor framed this dark assignment as a test, a pathway for Matt to prove his reformed character and earn his place in society. The target of this twisted redemption arc, Kane Ashby. Victor explicitly instructed Matt to infiltrate Kane's life, to weave himself into the fabric of Kane's personal and professional world, and to emerge as a trusted friend and indispensable ally. The ultimate goal is for Matt to act as a covert operative, gathering sensitive intelligence on every move Kane makes and reporting it directly back to the Newman patriarch. It is a masterful, sickening display of manipulation, leveraging an amnesiac's desperate desire for a clean slate to execute a corporate vendetta. For Matt Clark, this directive triggered a profound internal conflict. Stripped of his memories, this version of Matt possesses a nascent, fragile moral compass. He does not remember the atrocities he committed, but he is acutely aware that the task Victor is demanding feels inherently wrong. Matt voiced his hesitation, pointing out the undeniable shadiness of the request. To befriend a man with the sole intention of betraying him violates the very concept of the redemption Matt is so desperately seeking. He pushed back against Victor, questioning the ethics of becoming a corporate spy and the morality of destroying a man who is simply trying to rebuild his life at Chancellor Industries. It is a fascinating psychological paradox, the town's most notorious former villain hesitating to execute a villainous deed because his amnesia has inadvertently given him a conscience. Victor, however, is a master of justification. He swiftly dismantled Matt's moral objections with his trademark twisted logic. Victor argued that no physical lines needed to be crossed. There would be no violence, no overt criminality. This was simply business, a necessary act of retribution. Victor's motivation is rooted in a deep, unyielding grudge. He holds Cain Ashby partially responsible for the catastrophic loss of Newman Enterprises, referencing the recent corporate bloodbath where Phyllis Summers temporarily seized control. In Victor's mind, anyone who dares to threaten his legacy, even tangentially, must be systematically dismantled. The fact that Victor himself utilized AI fabricated evidence to frame Cain and Phyllis in the first place is a hypocrisy he conveniently ignores. For Victor, the end always justifies the means, and the end is always absolute dominance. Matt, clinging to logic in a sea of manipulation, attempted a rational counterargument. He pointed out that Cain Ashby is no longer a viable threat to the Newman Empire. Victor has successfully reclaimed his throne at Newman Enterprises, and Cain has moved on to accept the top position at Chancellor Industries. The war, by all logical metrics, is over. Why continue to hunt a man who has already been defeated? Matt's argument was a desperate attempt to find a logical exit ramp from this dark pact, a plea for Victor to recognize that this vendetta is unnecessary. Matt is trying to navigate a world he does not understand, relying on basic logic to protect himself from being dragged back into the darkness he is told he once inhabited. Victor's response to this logic was swift and uncompromising. He vehemently disagreed with Matt's assessment, declaring that Cain Ashby will always remain a threat as long as he continues to conduct business within the city limits of Genoa City. Victor's paranoia is absolute. He views the corporate landscape as a zero-sum game where the mere existence of a rival is an intolerable offense. When logic failed to sway Matt, Victor dropped the facade of the benevolent benefactor and unsheathed his ultimate weapon, the threat of total annihilation. He made it crystal clear that Matt's alternative to cooperation was a prison cell. Victor outlined the stark reality of Matt's existence: comply with the espionage plot, or be thrown to the wolves of the justice system for crimes he cannot even remember committing. The psychological weight of this ultimatum is staggering. Victor offered a poisoned chalice. He promised to wipe the slate clean, to utilize his immense wealth and influence to drop all pending charges against Matt, granting him the true second chance he craves. But the price of this salvation is his soul. Matt is a hostage to his own forgotten sins, trapped in a moral purgatory where the only path to freedom requires him to commit a profound betrayal. The manipulation is flawless. Victor has engineered a scenario where Matt's survival instinct must override his newfound conscience. It is a terrifying testament to Victor's ability to find the exact pressure point needed to break a man's will. In a moment of profound, twisted desperation, Matt turned to the one person he felt he could trust, Nick Newman. This interaction is perhaps the most psychologically complex moment of the entire ordeal. Matt, the historical abuser, looking to his primary victim for moral guidance. Because Matt saved Nick's life during the fentanyl overdose in Las Vegas, he feels a distorted sense of connection, a belief that he owes Nick the most. Matt pleaded with Nick for his opinion, desperately hoping that Nick would either validate this dark choice or offer a lifeline to save him from it. In my opinion, this is how Matt is protecting himself from pain. By forcing Nick to validate the choice, Matt can tell himself he is merely following the will of the man he wronged, thereby transforming a selfish act of survival into a twisted act of penance and shifting the moral burden off his own shoulders. Nick's response was a devastating blow. Standing in the shadows of his father's office, battling his own internal demons, Nick looked at the man who had caused his family so much agony and simply deferred to Victor's judgment. He offered no guidance, no salvation, and no condemnation of the plan. Nick's silence was a deafening endorsement of Victor's cruelty. By refusing to intervene, Nick betrayed not only Matt's fragile, misplaced trust but also his own moral code. It was the ultimate manifestation of his psychological exhaustion. Nick simply does not have the strength to fight his father, to protect Cain, or to save Matt from himself. His deference to Victor sealed Matt's fate, leaving the amnesiac completely isolated in his impossible choice. Faced with the impenetrable wall of Newman authority, Matt's resistance finally crumbled. The hesitation in his eyes gave way to the bleak realization of his reality. With no allies, no memories, and the looming threat of a prison sentence hanging over his head, Matt officially agreed to the terms of the unholy alliance. He accepted the mission to infiltrate Cain Ashby's life, to become the spy Victor demanded. It is a tragic capitulation, the moment a man trying desperately to walk in the light is forced back into the shadows by the very people who claim to hold the moral high ground. Matt's decision is born of pure survival, a heartbreaking acknowledgement that in Genoa City, freedom is rarely free, and the past is a debt that must always be paid. Just as the ink dried on this metaphorical deal with the devil, the heavy doors of the office swung open, and Adam Newman walked in. The timing of Adam's arrival serves as the perfect dramatic punctuation to this dark symphony. Adam, the cynical observer, the prodigal son who understands the toxic mechanics of the Newman family better than anyone alive, stepped into the room and immediately absorbed the heavy, conspiratorial atmosphere. As he learned the intricate details of the espionage plot against Kane and Matt's role as the reluctant weapon, Adam's eyes darted between his father, his broken brother, and the amnesiac pawn. Adam sees exactly what Victor has orchestrated, what Nick has passively allowed, and what Matt has been forced to become. Adam's presence guarantees that this dark secret will not remain buried in the tack house. The pieces are set on the board, the alliances are forged in caution, and the fallout from this psychological warfare promises to be absolutely spectacular.